Hello all, welcome back to this JavaScript object oriented programming series, and this is the 8th session of it. And in this session we'll be covering as to what are the various error types that are thrown by the JavaScript during your development. This can ease your development work. So let's start. So the various types of error types in JavaScript are error, eval error, internal error, range error, reference error, syntax error, type error, and URI error. Instances of error objects are thrown when runtime errors occur. The error object can also be used as a base object for user-defined exceptions. This is in general used by your application to throw your custom exceptions. These are unlikely to be thrown by the browser themselves because the browser implements its own set of exceptions ranging from eval error to URI errors for the types of exceptions that it encounters during our JavaScript code execution. The eval error is much related to the eval function, and whenever you send an invalid argument to the eval function, eval error gets thrown. Internal error, this is something that is thrown by the browser whenever it encounters too many switch cases or too many parentheses in a regular expression, or array initializer too large, or too much recursion. These are various scenarios in which your browser throws this internal error. So let's take a look on how to reproduce the same. So in this example you will see that I have defined a sample function which is invoking itself without any condition, which means it's an infinite recursion, and I have an explicit call to initialize or to start the infinite life cycle of the function method call. So in this case my catch block displays the message as internal error and too much recursion. This is one of the scenarios in which the browser throws the exception as internal error. Another error that is thrown by a browser is the range error. Range error object indicates an error when a value is not in the set or range of allowed values. So let us take a look at it. So in this case I have declared my variable to be a pi, and I have a toFix to 100. And when I execute the same on the browser, I get a value which is just appending zeros to it. So now let me increase the parameter that I pass to the toFixed method, which is currently accepting a maximum of 100. Now I get a range error that it can only extend a given number to 100 decimal digits. It cannot go beyond that. The next type of an error is the reference error. And reference error, whenever we try to reference to an object that is not yet declared, you get a reference error. And in this case you will see that I haven't declared the object obj. Still I am trying to access it in my alert, and this gives me an indication that it's a reference error. That's what my browser throws. Next, I have syntax error. There are two types of syntax errors. Syntax errors that cause your browser to come to a stop that it cannot execute anymore, or there are syntax errors which does allow your browser to continue with its execution and still display the message. In this case, in the first case, syntax error 1.html, your browser will stop its execution right here. It will not even go to the catch block, or it will not even continue with its execution with the further lines of the code, because the execution stops here. Thus, if you simulate it to the parsing phase of our JavaScript execution in the 7th session of this object-oriented series, we will understand that this syntax error is something that is caught at the parsing error, and execution stops in the parsing phase itself. Execution does not even go to the next phase. So I don't get any alerts. Whereas that is not the case with the syntax error 2 type, because the argument that I am passing to the eval is fine enough for a parsing phase of the JavaScript execution, but when it actually tries to execute this happens to be a syntax error. Hence it results me in an alert, and still execution can continue. I get a syntax error here. Next is the type error. Type error is something that occurs when you are trying to access a member variable of some object which is not yet declared. Unlikely as the reference error. Reference error is the referencing of the top object, the main object itself, whereas the type error is got to do with accessing the internal properties of a given object. Let us take a look at how we could reproduce that. Now in this case, though I have my variable obj declared, I do not have a .length property defined on it. So when I try to access it in my alert, I get the type error. So that's exactly what's happening here. URI error has got to do with more on functions like decode URI or encode URI. Whenever you pass an invalid argument to it, it will end up in a URI error. More examples, or the theory behind what forms a valid URI is out of the scope of this session. So let us take a look at a small example of an argument that could cause a URI error. So in this case, I get a URI as I am passing an invalid parameter to the encode URI method. So this is a short session which has described about the various JavaScript errors thrown by a browser engine on encountering our codes. So in the next and the final session, we are going to take a look at the various JavaScript, the various browsers available in the world now, the latest versions of them, and what are the script timers of them? By script timers, what I mean is the maximum amount of time given for JavaScript executing in the browser. Thank you.